Yesterday, I filmed I put up the video for how to make Gil in Final Fantasy XIV. But to any of you that play WoW, whether that be WoW Classic or WoW Retail, you might find yourself wanting to make gold. So I'm going to talk through terms in WoW terminology as we move into this. This is geared at retail because the token and the ability to convert it into kind of real money for the launcher makes gold something that you probably want an unlimited amount of. But in Classic, there's going to be an instant clamoring for it because you are all capped on the amount you could bring over from Classic Vanilla. And moving into Classic TBC, there's going to be a lot of new players and a lot of players who don't have the amount of wealth that they had because they were forced to leave some of it behind. So the first thing I will say is add-ons are your friend. Add-ons like TSM give you real-time pricing as you find items out in the world, give you real-time market data on how often that item sells, what its value is for you. But you're not effectively limited on the number of things you can have on the auction house at a given time. It's more of a soft cap in that the server sets a cap on the rate at which you can post items. And so you want to maintain the largest amount of money listed in theoretical value that could turn quickly. So 100,000 gold on retail that will take 10 days to sell, or 10,000 gold that will take 1 day to sell, is the same amount of money. So you want to take all the gold on there and multiply it roughly in your head by the average sale rate across your entire library of items, and you want to drive that number as high as possible. And however many listings you're willing to list daily to get there, or every 2 days, doesn't matter. Right? Because that's just a question of what are you willing to do? What are you willing to put in? So it doesn't really matter. But the first thing you want to do is you want to be maintaining those listings. And I would recommend a bank character to do it. A bank character means that they can manage all that inventory. They can have a jammed inbox and they can manage all of that. They can also stay logged in right near an auction house and a mailbox that ideally is not slammed with people, so you have nice fast load times. You log in, everything runs great. From there, you need to talk about what your options are to make money. We're going to move through this in order of the least amount of investment, the least amount of skill necessary, and we're going to go up as skill and time investment increase as well. Not everything is an equal ratio of those, but we're going to move up as that kind of gets that way. So the easiest thing you can do is you can actually just sell vendor items. There are a number of vendors throughout the game that you can either take a flight path to or get to with a mount that have either items that can only be bought so much of at a given time, it's on a cooldown, or it's a recipe that someone needs, and you can buy that stuff and you can make money off of it. TSM is your friend with this, and it can absolutely make money. You'll notice the sale rate on these is usually pretty low. The drive for people to undercut, they're all making money because as long as it's above that purchase price, these markets can be a bit volatile if everybody gets into them. It's a very high profit margin game in that your percentage amount of money made over what you invested is very, very high, but the total amount made is going to have a cap on it because people can always just go to if it gets too high, they can always just go to the vendor and buy that gear or buy that recipe or buy that material or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And so you want to be aware of that. There is some advantages with buying things locked behind reputations and stuff like that that's still sellable, but just know what market it is, know what vendors you need to check daily, and get that done. From there, you're going to move into gathering. Now, gathering in areas that don't allow flying can make more money, but effectively this is your hourly rate job. This is your minimum wage, low skill, high relaxation. You just get in there and you grind, and you get paid for the amount of hours you spend grinding, and then your hourly rate is determined by what items you're gathering. Keep in mind that WoW supports an amount of gathering over an enormous number of items, and things sell at different rates, and with TSM you know what those sales rates are right there in the tooltip. And so with TSM in hand, you can actually know, okay, my server on average sells more than the average daily sold per server rate. So if the daily sold rate is 200 on an average server, let's say my server's 400. Okay, I have 400 items of that in my inventory. I need to stop and I need to gather something else. And so gathering is your hourly rate, and that is your best rate to decide how much you're going to make off of this. From here we move into farming. Now, farming is done a couple of ways in WoW, the most common of which is 2x4s. The reason 2x4s work, we're talking in retail here, Classic's a little bit different. is that we effectively at some point moved to what's called group loot. The theory behind group loot in World of Warcraft was that when you're in a group, you don't want this round robin, because then I don't feel like I'm getting loot all the time. So we'll make this party loot system where everybody gets loot all the time. And so everybody gets paid. That means if a monster drops 1 silver for you, and then you and I party up, it's going to be dropping money for both of us. And the total amount of money is going to skyrocket. So that, like, because it's not going to take that 1 silver and divide it across 5 players, it's going to duplicate money. And so it's just a straight up money printing machine. It does the same with items. That's great. That encourages people to party over run individually. But then what happens if there's a world boss or a quest mob and I kill it and somebody else jumps in and grabs the tag? Well, do they get loot? You know what? Let's say yes. Let's say as long as it's not being taken on by a full 5-man, that yes, they'll get loot. Okay, well then I'll clear things in 4-mans, and then that way if we hop on to somebody else's pull, okay, so 4-mans is our max group that does not isolate that monster's loot. Great. How many groups can do this? 2. That is where we get 2 groups of 4. You now have 8 people sharing loot off a monster without being penalized by forming a raid. With 8 people, you can actually, in current content, take those people, depending on class and gearing, and depending on the content you're trying to farm, and you can position them into areas that do force spawning. When you talk about spawning in World of Warcraft, we have very deep knowledge of this because gold making's been going on a long time, that there's a couple of ways a mob spawns, but there are times in which a monster is guaranteed to have a certain amount of that monster on the map at any given time because it is necessary for something like a world quest. And so what that means is, say there's 10 monsters have to be up over these 12 spawning locations at any given time. As soon as we kill 3, 1 spawns in one of the missing locations. Okay, how do we take advantage of that? Well, we have 8 people, so we spread them out, we pull everything into big groups, put them on monk statues, AoE them down. We're burning them down so fast, and it's forcing whole rings of them to spawn at once. We're now jumping it to where we're no longer killing hundreds of these monsters per hour, we're killing thousands of them per hour, and we're multiplying all of their loot times 8. And so farming can be incredibly lucrative, but it's based on what item you're farming and what that sells for. So it can pay less than the gathering per hour, but it can also pay more. So it is very much a commission-based job where you need to go out and see what people are willing to pay for, and then see what your take of that is going to be. Some things actually form into kind of a mix of both, where you have group farms of gathering content in things like Nagrand Corium farming, where we use the 10-person multi-tapping game system to then form groups of 10, even cross-server, to run around, and every time a Corium node is up, share that node, and then the rest of the time trigger force spawn on those nodes. And so the delta between gathering and farming, it really starts to shift when you start talking about running transmog runs of dungeons, not once or twice, not on a weekly raid clear, but I'm running all 10 instance lockouts per hour for multiple hours straight. And I'm using a add-on like Loot Appraiser to put a score and tell me how much money I've made in average region values. And then I'm using an add-on called Loot Appraiser Challenge, and I'm now running that competitively, as a, where we are competing to see who can make the most money, but everybody takes their loot home with them. So these systems can be gamified. They can become a game in their own, which is incredibly important when you talk about times where maybe we don't get a patch for, let's say, I don't know, a year. So it definitely can add a whole new wave of content to go get lost in when current content either isn't available or is something that you aren't interested in. From here, we move into crafting. Crafting in WoW is all about acquiring all of the recipes. Use an add-on like All the Things to track all the recipes in the game and get yourself up to 70 or 80% of the total recipes in the game. There are websites where you can type your character name in and get a feel for how you're doing. Go get every recipe available to you, and then just use TSM to craft what's profitable, and just flood the server with it. Just take over that market, and when you feel you've got that market under control, take over another one, and just get into crafting. Crafting is a huge investment on the front end to gather the reputations and the rare drop recipes or purchase them on the front end, but eventually those items become highly profitable, and you're continuing to, since crafting is just a flat, let's say 2-second craft, every time you do that, it's only 2 more seconds to your total time spent, but that's where you make the money. And so your hourly rate kind of on the back end gets better and better and better as you get further and further and further into crafting. So have multiple characters leveled, have all the crafts, and get deep into crafting mounts, minions, transmog gear, Be familiar with that. Get to know a market. You can make an immense amount of money doing it. And I encourage you to look at resources like Want to Buy Gold, Persephone, a whole number of them. There's whole Discord communities. It is an immensely deep part of this game, and it has an entire community around it that I encourage you to go get lost in. From here, we can talk about things like vendor shuffles. This is where you literally take large amounts of cloth, buy it up, and sell the item to a vendor. We can also disenchant those items if the vendor price isn't good enough, and we can sell the enchanting mats either as enchants or enchants. Like enchanting mats, we can sell the mats meaning raw, or we can then use that enchanter to turn them into current enchants. That's going to be most profitable with your current expansion content typically. But we saw things where speculation going into this expansion was going to make linen the hot thing. It ended up being a little more of a Dogecoin and a little less of a Bitcoin there. And then from there, we talk about services. This is selling Mythic Plus clears, selling raid clears, selling the mount drops from various things. And there are ways to make this farmable. Just be aware that you can cross terms of service pretty quickly depending on how you're doing this. So just remember that WoW is pretty strict on, if they find out, they're pretty strict on making sure that no more than 2 adults have login access to an account. So a parent and any number of children, totally fine. 2 spouses, technically against the rules, keeps them from getting involved in like who owns the account type rule. Should those people ever, 2 brothers decide that they want their own accounts, well, I want to keep our main account. Okay, well, only one of you was listed on it. So 1 person over the age of 18 can play on an account. That's it. So don't let other people log onto your account. Just be aware that's a breach of terms of service. It is one of the things that Blizzard will ban you for. That's it, guys. That's an introduction to gold making. If you have questions on any one of those, there are a huge number of resources out there on how to get deeper into this. WoW has an incredibly diverse gold making community, and I encourage you to go learn all sorts of things that you may have never known about economics, game systems, and optimizing the way these meet in the middle, and farm up the ability to buy your next expansion, to buy your next month's subscription, or to buy your next on the store cosmetic with WoW Gold. That you actually got to have fun learning and making, and then rewarded you with something that would have cost you real money. That's just me talking about a little bit of something that I'm fascinated with, but mostly here on this channel, I just talk about anything related to gaming, kinda.